Right. Forget everything you think you know about British politics, because we've just had a polling bombshell that's turned the whole game upside down. Keir Starmer, losing in the polls. Nigel Farage, also losing in the polls. So who's winning? A bloke who isn't even in Parliament. I'm not joking. Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester, is currently beating both of them in head-to-head polling, and Westminster is having an absolute meltdown about it. This is the political equivalent of your local pub team suddenly beating Manchester United and Liverpool on the same day. Strap in, because this gets wild. Let's start with the numbers, because they are absolutely mental. Ipsos, one of the most respected polling firms in the country, asked people a simple question. Who would make a better prime minister, Andy Burnham or Nigel Farage? And get this, 29% picked Burnham, only 28% went for Farage. Now remember, just back in September, Farage had a 3-point lead over Burnham. So in a matter of months, Burnham's not just caught up, he's overtaken him. That's not a minor shift, that's a political earthquake. But wait, it gets better. Or worse if you're Keir Starmer, because when pollsters asked people to choose between Burnham and the actual sitting Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, 28% said Burnham would be better. And Starmer? 15%. 15! That's not just losing, that's getting absolutely battered. Your own party's mayor, who doesn't even sit in your parliament, is nearly doubling your support. If that doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what would. And here's where it gets properly brutal. Only 12% of people think Britain is heading in the right direction. 12! 71% think we're going the wrong way. Those are catastrophic numbers. That's not just bad governance ratings, that's please someone, anyone, make it stop territory. The country's basically given the current direction a 1-star review and demanded a refund. Now, Andy Burnham's favorability ratings are the stuff of political fantasy. 3 in 10 people have a favorable opinion of him. Let's put that in perspective, shall we? That's higher than Farage at 29%, higher than Ed Davey at 24%, absolutely smashing Kemi at 23%, and more than 10 points clear of Starmer at 17%. The man's not even in Westminster, and he's more popular than every major party leader. It's like being the substitute player who everyone wants to see on the pitch while the actual team captain is getting booed by the crowd. But here's where the polling gets really spicy. Rachel Reeves, the chancellor who delivered that autumn budget, is not having a good time. 61% of people have an unfavorable opinion of her. Only 13% like what she's doing. Those are absolutely dire numbers. You could announce free puppies for everyone and still struggle to get favorability ratings that low. The budget was supposed to be Labour's big moment to set out their stall, show they're different from the Conservatives, prove they can manage the economy. Instead, it's landed like a lead balloon wrapped in disappointment. Now, let's talk about the head-to-head matchups, because they're fascinating and slightly terrifying depending on which party you support. When people were asked to choose between a Labour government led by Starmer and a Reform UK government led by Farage, they split dead even, 37% each. That's not a statistical blip. That's a genuine tie. Labour, the party that won a massive majority just months ago, is now neck and neck with Reform UK in a hypothetical election. That's not just concerning. That's red lights flashing, Houston, we have a problem level concerning. And it gets even more interesting when you throw Kemi into the mix. When asked who'd make a better PM, Starmer or Badenoch, 26% picked Kemi, 25% picked Keir. Essentially a dead heat. But here's the kicker. Last December, Starmer had a 14-point lead over Badenoch. 14 points! That's not an erosion of support, that's a complete collapse. In just over a year, Starmer's gone from commanding double-digit leads to barely holding on in head-to-head matchups. That's the political equivalent of going from winning the league to fighting relegation in one season. The Reform versus Conservative battle is equally tight. When people were asked to pick between Farage and Badenoch as PM, 25% went for Nigel, 24% for Kemi. Another statistical tie. But remember, in December last year, Farage had a 7-point lead over Badenoch. So while Starmer's numbers have crashed, Badenoch's have actually improved. She's clawed back ground, consolidated support, and made herself a viable alternative. The Tories are rising from the ashes like a slightly singed phoenix. Now here's where it gets really interesting for the next election, whenever that might be. Reform UK tops the table when people are asked which parties they'd consider voting for. 36% said they'd think about backing Reform. The Conservatives are second at 32%. The Lib Dems are 29%, and Labour tied with the Greens at 26%. Let that sink in. The party currently running the country is tied with the Greens when people are asked who they'd consider supporting. That's not just bad, that's existential crisis territory. So what does all this mean for Andy Burnham? Well, his supporters are absolutely buzzing, and they're seeing these numbers and thinking, right, he's got a shot at leading Labour. And on paper, why wouldn't they be? He's popular, he's got executive experience running Greater Manchester, he's a known quantity who people seem to actually like. But here's his massive problem. He's not in Parliament. He doesn't have a parliamentary seat. And to lead a parliamentary party, you generally need to be, in Parliament. Now, theoretically, Burnham could run in a by-election, win a seat, and then launch a leadership challenge. But here's where it gets messy. Reform UK would absolutely target any by-election he contested. They'd throw everything at it, because defeating Burnham in his own comeback attempt would be the ultimate political scalp. It'd be like slaying a dragon just as it's emerging from its cave. The publicity alone would be worth millions to Reform. And here's where Labour's nightmare scenario comes into focus. They're trapped between a rock and a hard place. Stick with Starmer and watch the polls continue to crater, or risk a messy leadership contest that could split the party even further and hand Reform UK even more momentum. It's a lose-lose situation dressed up as a choice. Lucy Powell, Labour's newly elected deputy leader, has been doing the rounds trying to rally the troops. She's basically begging everyone to get behind Starmer so they don't hand councils and power bases to Reform. But here's the thing about appeals for unity. They only work if people actually want to unite. And right now, with these polling numbers, you can imagine plenty of Labour MPs looking at Burnham's ratings and thinking maybe there's another way. The analysis from Kieran Pedley at Ipsos is absolutely spot on. Burnham holds net positive favorability ratings and is preferred as PM to both Starmer and Farage. Meanwhile, Badenoch's personal ratings and her position relative to Starmer and Farage have improved, but both face massive obstacles to becoming Prime Minister. Burnham's not in Parliament, Badenoch's party hasn't seen a notable uptick despite her personal improvement. So we're in this weird political limbo where the person people want isn't available, and the people who are available aren't particularly wanted. Let's talk about what this polling really represents, because it's not just about individual politicians, it's about deep dissatisfaction with the entire political establishment. When only 12% of people think the country is going in the right direction, that's not just criticism of the government, that's a rejection of the entire political class. People are looking for alternatives, for anyone who feels different from the usual Westminster crowd. And that's exactly what Andy Burnham represents. He's outside the bubble. He's running Greater Manchester, dealing with real issues, making actual decisions that affect people's daily lives. He's not caught up in the Westminster nonsense, the parliamentary theater, the endless point-scoring debates that mean nothing to normal people. He feels authentic in a way that's incredibly rare in modern British politics. But here's the brutal reality. Authenticity and popularity don't automatically translate to power. The British political system isn't designed for outsiders to waltz in and take over. You need to be in Parliament. You need to build alliances. You need to navigate the internal party machinery. And all of that takes time and political capital, and frankly, luck. Burnham might have the popular support, but converting that into actual leadership is a whole different challenge that might prove insurmountable regardless of his polling numbers. For Starmer, these numbers are a 5-alarm fire. His personal ratings are in the toilet. His government's direction is being rejected by more than 7 in 10 people. His chancellor is deeply unpopular, and his own party's mayor is out-polling him as a potential prime minister. That's not just a bad news cycle, that's a crisis of legitimacy. How do you govern effectively when your own supporters prefer someone else to lead? And for Farage, this polling is a mixed bag. On one hand, Reform UK is topping the charts for parties people would consider supporting. They're tied with Labour in a hypothetical election. They're building real momentum. But on the other hand, Farage himself is losing ground to Burnham.
His favorability ratings are essentially flat, and he's tied with Badenoch in head-to-head matchups when he used to lead comfortably. So while Reform is rising, Farage might be hitting a ceiling. The Conservative versus Reform battle is equally tight. When people were asked to pick between Farage and Badenoch as PM, 25% went for Nigel, 24% for Kemi. Another statistical tie. But remember, in December last year, Farage had a 7-point lead over Badenoch. So while Starmer's numbers have crashed, Badenoch's have actually improved. She's clawed back ground, consolidated support, and made herself a viable alternative. The Tories are rising from the ashes like a slightly singed phoenix. What we're really seeing here is a complete fracturing of traditional political loyalties. The old certainties don't apply anymore. Labour can't rely on being the default alternative to the Tories. The Conservatives can't assume they'll bounce back automatically. The Reform Party can't take their momentum for granted. And outsider figures like Burnham can suddenly emerge